I want you to try and picture a sound for a second.
Okay.
Think of the most aggressive, just heart-pounding speed you can imagine. We're talking about a tempo of, 170 beats per minute?
Which, for context, is like a full-on sprint. It's incredibly fast.
It's relentless. It's almost exhausting just to think about. In most music, that speed means something. Dark is coming.
Heavy industrial noise, or maybe a horror movie soundtrack.
Right. But now, imagine layering that speed with pure sunshine. I mean, absolute sugary pop happiness.
So high-pitched vocals, catchy melodies.
Exactly. Melodies that sound like they've been pulled from a Saturday morning cartoon, and synths that just sparkle. It just shouldn't work. It sounds like a jackhammer trying to play a lullaby.
And yet, it not only worked, it created one of the most fascinating cultural feedback loops in recent music history.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into happy hardcore. But we're not just looking at its origins in the UK. We're tracking a mutation. We're going to follow how this gritty, illegal rave sound traveled 6,000 miles to Japan.
And then got completely absorbed by otaku culture.
Merging with anime, with video games, and becoming something entirely new called J-core.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of what some call the Galapagos effect, where a species, or in this case, a music genre, gets isolated and evolves into something totally unique.
So we're going from muddy fields in England to the neon arcades of Akihabara. We've got a ton of research here on this encounter of high-speed beats and Kawaii, so let's get into it.
To really get it, we have to start with the basics, the DNA of happy hardcore, back in the early 90s.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's, say, 1994. You're in a warehouse in the UK. What are you actually hearing?
You're hearing a split, really. Rave music at that time was getting darker. It was fracturing into things like jungle and drum and bass, which were complex and, moody.
Right.
But another group of producers decided to go in the complete opposite direction. They kept the speed at 160 to 170 BPM, but they just threw out all the darkness.
When you say 170 BPM, I feel like we have to keep hammering that home. Most pop music is, 100? Maybe 120?
A typical house track is maybe 128 BPM. So yeah, 170 is pushing the physical limit of what you can dance to without just sort of vibrating on the spot.
Ah, right.
It's explosive, as our sources call it. But the real defining thing about happy hardcore wasn't just the kick drum. It was the challenge of putting a real emotional melody on top of that chaos.
Because if you just speed up a normal song, it sounds absurd.
Totally ridiculous. The vocals would sound like chipmunks. But that actually became a feature, not a bug. Producers started deliberately pitching vocals up.
Creating that cartoon-like quality.
So you'd have these frantic breakbeat rhythms underneath, and then these euphoric, high-pitched piano riffs and diva vocals right on top.
It's pure energy music. It's designed for a dopamine rush.
It's literally happy meets hardcore, euphoria and aggression. And in the UK, it was huge for a few years, but by the late 90s, the coolness factor wore off. It started to be seen as, a bit cheesy.
The scene moved on.
Yeah, to trance or harder styles. So the trend dies out in Europe, the parties stop.
But this is where the story gets really interesting. Because just as that fire was going out in London, a little spark landed in Tokyo. And it didn't just smolder, it found gasoline.
This is that Galapagos idea we mentioned. When happy hardcore got to Japan, it didn't just find an audience. It found a culture that was kind of perfectly primed for that exact sound.
The research calls it an affinity. But why? Why did this hyper-fast, cheesy music stick in Japan when it was becoming a punchline in the West?
One word, melody. That's the key. If you look at the Japanese music scene in the 90s, especially anime or anime songs and video game music, it's always been about strong, bright, really memorable melodies.
Okay, that makes sense. A lot of Western techno is more about the groove, right? The repetition.
Exactly. It's loop-based. But a lot of Japanese listeners want a song, a structure, a hook. And happy hardcore, with its big pianos and vocals, felt more like a song.
So they didn't just copy it, though?
Oh, not at all. They started putting it through local filters.
Yeah.
The production technique started to change to match the local aesthetic, which we can broadly call kawaii or cute.
And when we say kawaii here, it's not just like a picture of Hello Kitty. It's a sonic texture.
Right. It's an aggressive kind of cuteness. Producers started sampling directly from Bishujo games, which are these beautiful girl visual novels.
So they were taking voice clips.
Yeah, snippets of anime characters giggling or crying or shouting their catchphrases and then just chopping them up over that 170 BPM kick.
That is such a wild image. A thumping rave beat and then an anime voice just glitching all over it.
And then you layer on the chiptune sound.
Which is the sound from old 8-bit consoles, like NES or Game Boy.
Yes, but it's not just about nostalgia. A lot of these early Japanese producers were using tracker software on computers that had very similar sound chips. It creates this very bright, very synthetic, square wave sound that just cuts right through everything else.
So it's sharp, it's digital, it's not trying to sound organic at all.
Not even a little. The result is what the sources call anime rave, a total fusion. You take the tension of the UK beat, but you swap the gritty warehouse vibe for a digital Akihabara vibe. This is the foundation of J-core.
Okay, but here's what I'm stuck on. In the UK, this music spread through illegal parties, fields, warehouses. Japan has very strict nightlife laws. You're not just breaking into a building in Tokyo for a rave.
A very good point.
So how did people even hear this stuff?
This is maybe the most critical difference. The way it spread wasn't the club, it was the arcade.
The game center.
Specifically the rhythm game Boom. We absolutely have to talk about Konami's Bemini series. We're talking Dance Dance Revolution and Beatmania IDX.
I think everyone knows DDR, the game with the arrows you stomp on, but I don't think most people realize how important it was for music distribution.
Well, think about a Japanese arcade in, say, 1999. It's loud, it's chaotic, there are lights flashing everywhere. It's a total sensory overload. If you're designing a game where the player has to physically move their feet to the beat, you can't use slow ambient music. It just doesn't work.
You need something with drive, with adrenaline.
You need 170 BPM. The game mechanics were literally demanding that tempo.
Yeah.
As players got better, the songs had to get faster and more complex to keep up with them. The game itself was selecting for the genre.
That's incredible. So the difficulty of the game actually preserved the speed of the music.
Precisely. And it made the rave accessible. In the UK, you had to be in a certain subculture. In Japan, you just had to be a high school kid with 100 yen. It took the music from the underground and put it in the after-school hangout.
And this created actual stars, right? The notes mention artists like Naoki and DJ Shimomura.
Naoki Maeda is a giant in this story. His tracks in DDR were, for millions of people around the world, the first time they ever heard happy hardcore.
Yeah.
I would argue that for a huge chunk of millennials, their first taste of electronic dance music wasn't a DJ.
It was a machine in a movie theater lobby.
Or a bowling alley, yeah. It was a gateway. You had kids in America or France stepping on arrows to this Japanese mutated UK rave music, and they had no idea about the lineage.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm sure I heard something like that in an arcade long before I knew what a rave even was.
It planted the seeds. But as we move into the 2000s, the sound evolves again. It moves out of the arcade and goes deeper, deeper into the internet, into the bedroom producer scene. This is where happy hardcore really becomes J-core.
And this is where otaku culture really takes over.
Right. And we should be careful with that word otaku. It's not just anime fan. In the early 2000s, especially around Akihabara, it meant a very specific kind of obsessive, tech-savvy enthusiast.
The era of obscure forums, hardware modding, super niche interests.
Exactly. And the way music was shared shifted from arcade machines to doujin events.
Okay, we need to unpack doujin, because this is a concept that doesn't really have a perfect Western equivalent. We say indie, but that doesn't quite fit.
It's fundamentally different. Doujin is much closer to a fan economy or a gift economy. It means self-published, works art books, games, music that are sold directly by the creator to other fans at these huge conventions.
Like Comic-Con or M3. And when you say huge, we're not talking about a hotel ballroom.
No, Comic-Con gets 500,000 people, so just picture it. A massive hall, just rows and rows of tables. And behind each table is a producer selling a CD they burn themselves.
No record label, no marketing department.
They're not trying to get on the radio. They're making music for the maybe 500 other people in the world who are just as obsessed with this one niche thing as they are.
And that complete lack of commercial pressure must have just unleashed total creative chaos.
It allowed for the most extreme experiments. If a producer wanted to make a track at 220 BPM that sampled a copyrighted anime and then just devolved into pure noise,
they could, because who is going to stop them?
Exactly. And this is where figures like DJ Sharpnel emerge. The music is just frantic. It samples everything illegally. It's distorted. It's incredibly fast. It is the sound of internet information overload in, like, 2005.
And then artists like M1E taking it even further.
M1E took the happy part out and just cranked the speed, creating this niche of speedcore. But on the other side, you had artists like Plight and Rodellis who kept that melodic Kawaii vibe and polish it into something that sounded incredibly professional.
So you have the soup bubbling away in Akihabara. UK rave, anime voices, arcade game difficulty, the freedom of the Dujin market, and eventually the rest of the world starts to notice.
This is the reverse import part of this story, and it's really the climax.
Because in the 90s, Japan was importing the sound from the West.
And now, the West is importing the mutated version back from Japan. The internet just completely flattened the world. Kids in America and Europe started finding these J-core tracks on YouTube or SoundCloud.
And to them, it wasn't old UK rave.
To them, it was anime music. The association had totally flipped.
The new formula became fast beats plus anime aesthetics equals J-core.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now you have Western producers who are deliberately making music in the Japanese style. They're using the high-pitched vocals, the chip sounds, the anime album art.
It's like a global game of telephone. The UK whispers hardcore, Japan hears it and shouts kawaii, and now the whole world is shouting kawaii back.
And you can see that DNA in so many modern genres. The rise of hyperpop, for example, or artists like Porter Robinson. That idea of combining intense electronic music with these unabashedly cute or nerdy aesthetics is now a global thing.
It is so funny. If you had told some DJ in a warehouse in 1993 that his music's legacy would be carried on by anime girls and dancing games,
You would have thought you were insane. But that's the beautiful part of all this. It really challenges our standard idea of globalization. We tend to worry that it just means everything becomes the same.
right, the Starbucksification of culture.
Exactly. But the story of J-Core shows the opposite can happen. It shows that when culture travels, it hybridizes. It gets taken apart and rebuilt with local pieces. Japan didn't just consume Western music, they digested it and created a whole new organism.
And that new organism, J-Core, isn't really British and it isn't traditionally Japanese. It's a third thing, a true hybrid.
And that third thing is often where the most exciting art happens. It's just a reminder that culture is a living thing. It has to adapt to survive. In the UK, happy hardcore couldn't survive the trend cycle.
But in Japan.
But in the unique ecosystem of Akihabara, protected by the language barrier and the Dujin market, it found a way to thrive.
So next time you're scrolling online and you hear some frantic, super fast beat with a sugary vocal over it, maybe don't just scroll past. Think about the incredible journey that sound took.
From a warehouse in Manchester.
To a smoky arcade in Tokyo, to a convention center table, and then all the way back to your phone.
It's a long trip for such a fast beat.
It certainly is. And hey, if you're feeling brave, maybe find a DDR machine somewhere and see if your knees can still handle 170 BPM.
I think I'll leave that to the professionals. My body can't handle the Galapagos effect anymore.
Fair enough. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Keep your ears open for the unexpected.
Pleasure as always.
Catch you next time.